Alright, welcome back, guys. Now we've pretty much got the majority of the overall silhouette profile pretty well sorted out. We've got the grip pretty much where we're gonna go with it. We've already established this back here. But one part we're still working on is the front area of the, well, right behind the barrel. We have a hole there, and we can't have that. So, in an effort to try to figure out a way to blend this all together without just like building a box around it, I was originally really wanting to keep these kind of iron sight looking details, but I think what I'm going to do instead, I talked to the owner and we kind of threw some ideas around. I'm going to try to see if we can pull a chunk of tack rail out of the parts bin and affix it here to kind of bridge the gap between the actual shell and then this barrel attachment piece. Since this is integrated into the shell, you need something that's going to kind of tie them together a little bit. And there's such a radical drop off here where it comes, drops and then comes forward, that I think if we added some shell, added a bit of rail up here, and then whatever part of the shell we end up using for that, we kind of tie into the lower part here. And I don't know how far we'll have to blend it in, or if just having the rail and then just enough here to cover, if that'll help. Because I'm thinking if we can have something to where when you have this, the body line comes, here, and then it kind of, follows along, instead of having, it kind of comes up here and then just shoots straight back and then straight up. If we have something that kind of follows and kind of rounds everybody off, it makes it a little more methodical, a little more kind of how it's supposed to be. So we're going to do some digging through the parts bin and see what kind of rail bits we can come up with. And this is all just blasters that I thrifted or whatever, that I robbed some parts out of or cut some pieces off of. And I still have all this other stuff laying around, so I'll dig through and see what we can find and then see how the rail bits relate to the area below it and see if we can get something to fill this nice little hole. Not so much of a hole on this side, but I do want it to be symmetrical either way. We do need something that's at least going to cover that much, and actually a little bit more, since we are going to have some big block motors in there. So let's see what the box has to offer. Okay, we've got a Spectre, which, they won't even give us the height we need. So, I got pieces of a Raider, which, like the height, would be close, but, and there's plenty of rail, but this is just such a gradual, nice round shape to it that, especially if we could use this area, that'd be kind of, oh hey, you could actually use this little bump here, the extra little bump for the extra motor clearance, but it'd be even better if it was like reversed to where you could use the kind of round it. Well, I don't know. This is just a little too curvaceous and shapely for the aesthetic we got here. This is fairly edgy with some corners on it, but it's not overly edgy. This seems just a little too curvy. Several rails there, but that's a bit large. Rough cut would definitely give us some width and height, but it's a little, they're again too roundy, which might look kind of weird where you get a lot of sharp edges and then just kind of looks kind of bulbous and weird there. In fact, that might be a little too wide. That might be a little outrageous. That might be a little too boxy, a little too edgy, and I don't think the height would get us where we need to be. Retaliator. Okay, that's looks like that gives us a lot more room of height to play with. It's fairly boxy, but it's got some nice corners on it. It's got some kind of cool little details there. Let's take a closer look. Definitely have the height we need. It's already got, it's already pretty thin up here, since we'll have to probably trim these little iron sight details off and then kind of lap the bit of rail over the top, because we don't want the front rail to be any higher than the back, because that'll be weird. And we don't want it to be weird, we want it to be cool, because that's the rule. So we're going to be using aftermarket clamp-on style iron sights, so we don't need to worry about location of the little tab or the little locky deal back there. So, in fact, we don't even need that much length. But there's potential here. We could cut it shorter. We can either run it this way and have it flat, which wouldn't be so cool, but you'd be able to use some of these guys, these little kind of vent-looking details. If we go that way, then we get the advantage of this little angle here. And, ooh, using the rails, adding the rail on top, that'll give us at least one screw port in this top area where we don't have really anything right now, so that's a bonus. So we'll put this guy over here for a minute, see what else we got. Some barricade, but I think the flatness here is, I mean, you got width and we got, well, we can kind of work with the height there, but we got some height there, but it's just a real bit of ledge we're working with there. So maybe no on that guy. Yeah. Oh. Huh. Kind of like that. Fairly short. Get a little bit of fancy detail here that we may or may not be able to use. We've got some kind of angle here. We'd probably lop off that guy and run it. Yeah, probably run it backwards essentially. So, so we run the rail about there. We'd be notching it out here a little ways just to make room around the bump here. We're not really having it on the width. Looks like there's about enough width to cover this side, the short side of the flywheel cage, not the motor side. So if we did use this for the purpose of adding a rail and covering up some of this detail and tying things together, we'd still have to add a little bit more right on the outside to cover especially the extended motors. So, no other real candidates. I think we'll take the priming slides off both of these, and so we have some smaller pieces to work with and get a little closer holding some things up. Not totally committed to these yet, but we're at least going to take a closer look. Okay, so we've got some smaller pieces to work with. So if we use this guy, put them up there. Let's see, pull it back. Probably want to trim off this kind of like goofy little like iron sight kind of thing they have going on here on the back, where it kind of like gives kind of the forked detail. Probably trim that off since you don't really need that, and it looks kind of goofy being on the front. If it was on the back, you know, maybe not so much, but definitely need to lop that off. Wouldn't need to remove too much of the height, it looks like. To about there, so we'd need to trim at least to that line, which means we're getting into this detail here, which is, you know, kind of too bad, kind of, but, you know, we weren't really counting on that. That was kind of a bonus. So, actually having this little part here, where it kind of angles up and does this thing, kind of looks cool because it gives it a little, kind of an aggressive feel. I'm gonna get brave and I'm gonna cut this little loop thing off the back, just because I don't think I'll be using this as a Maverick anytime soon. So let's at least get this off out of here so we can improve the visual effect. Okay. So it would fit actually kind of like that-ish, kinda. And we'll be trimming this part off the back. I'm just more looking for the front line here, so we'll be definitely cutting around that. So let's actually kind of see how centered up it actually fit back there. So no matter what, even if we did that, we wouldn't really be accomplishing much as far as the motor cover side of things, as much as just the rail itself, but at least that puts us in a, you know, closer ballpark that we can kind of add something to that. But I kind of like that direction. That's okay, I think. It'll be subtle, I'm hoping, but at least it's got the kind of similar. It's got edges and it's pretty boxy, but it's not overly aggressively square. So I think it would tie into the Centurion aesthetic enough, especially once we get all the digital camo detail sanded off, since this is pretty smooth. And of course the Nerf logo will be going away anyway. So there's, I think there's potential there. I think unless the Retaliator slide ends up being a whole lot better, we're at least going to start cutting on that and getting it kind of close. So let's see what this guy has to offer. Put that guy there. Yeah, we're definitely not going to be able to use like all three of those if we favored the front here. So we'll be losing two, which I don't know, I'm not liking the verticalness there. So if we add this and have the knocked off side, it is an angle back, but not really an appreciable amount. I mean, it looks okay. It wouldn't look bad necessarily, but I think I'm kind of a bigger fan of the a little more slightly aggressive like ramp angle there, and this little kind of, ooh, hey, there's kind of this little faux screw hardware detail here. I don't know if you can pick that up in this light, but it kind of mimics the oversized ones elsewhere on the Centurion, so that's kind of a bonus. I kind of like that it's not like doesn't like match, but it kind of hints at the same kind of aesthetic, so that's cool. Yeah, I'm not liking these as much as I originally thought I would. So I think we're going to do a little trimming on this and pull it into size a little bit, cut a little off the back here and a little off the bottom, and try to kind of pull it down into the proportions we're really looking at, which I'm kind of thinking if we can line it up with the edge here, that way we at least have a consistent line as we come up, and that'll only give us about that much rail. I mean, just that little amount, but I think that's going to be enough to give the a visual effect and to make it functional for mounting the little iron sights. So let's start doing a little cutting. Okay, looking at things, just looking at kind of the height part of the things, I'm thinking that because we're going to be competing with this area here, that I think I'm going to remove some of this material in this area. Do I want to do that? Kind of torn. Well, I'm thinking just because it's going to be snug here where the rail is, I'm thinking about cutting just the top off before it turns into the kind of round tubular part. Totally. I think I'll just knock off at least. See if we're gonna hold it on kind of like that. I hesitate to start cutting on the Centurion part since that's the part that we can't really replace readily. Maverick bits, yeah, we can get those for 4 bits. So I just want to make sure that we are committed to, yes, this is going to be awesome before we start cutting on the actual Centurion part, because if we change our tune and it's like, oh, yeah, Centurion stuff that's glued in and integrated to the rest of the shell. Yeah, that sucks. So, I'm just going to keep clipping on this a little bit, see how much further we can take it before we cut on here. Worst case scenario, I scrounge up another Maverick and you know, make these similar cuts, leave it a little long, and we cut into this guy, but at least we're wiser for it. Now, you know, one thing I just realized, I'd been doing all my comparisons, you know, looking at straight from the top and comparing that, and I knew that it wasn't quite wide enough to act as the full-blown motor cover and all that, but I'm also realizing that this is like in no way wide enough to really do anything good. I was comparing lining up to the outside here, which only went like half the distance we really needed to go. So if you line it up kind of here, that's not really going to work, because we'll basically be coming down at this point. So we'll basically come up here, round over, and then turn into a box again. And that I'm not liking that, because then you'll have so many broken lines here, plus we still have to build a box here to go over the motors, and I don't think that's going to work. We may pull part of it back, or use the red. I don't know. I just don't think that's going to work as good as I originally thought. So, we've got this guy that has, looks more like he'd have the width we need. So we could put that there. And since I believe this is the area where we actually cut out the rail from back here, so we're missing, like what, almost a ½ inch, a little less of material, so that pulls it in a little closer, which would have maybe not all the clearance we need for to act as a motor cover and everything, but and we have kind of the same lines, the same aesthetic, and basically it'd be in the same plane as the rest of the section that we cut out. But my only concern is what to do at the end, because you put it on end and now you have a big scoop essentially on the front. So we need a way to tastefully round that off and not make it look like we took a piece of scrap and just boxed to the end. So we really don't have anything else that covers the end of things. Not much to work with there. We got these guys. So I think I'm gonna have to do a little more digging through the parts box, and so give me a minute and I'll see what I can scare up. I just came across this, the hamp grip off of the Demolisher rocket launcher, which I cut off from another integration currently in the works. But in hindsight, boy, that would have fit in there and actually could have looked pretty darn cool. But I still like that more. So, but, just throwing ideas out there for anybody that's kind of following along with maybe a similar project. But, it'll get used for something. Okay, just had an idea. My original thought was to take a single piece of, like the top of a blaster that already has the rail stuck to it, and be able to just, come along and just plop it on top. I think, since we do have to have such a wide area that needs to be relatively flat, because we still have to come out and around the motors and stuff that are going to be even deeper, I'm thinking what I can do. I found this piece of Stampede, which is the front of the magazine. Grip kind of comes. Let's see, where's this thing? Fits in like. Nope. There we go. Okay, like that. Turn it upside down, and we have a piece that's pretty much capped on the end, is roughly the height kind of that we need, and is not really deep, but I'm thinking what we can do, zoom in just a little bit, is take this much of it and put it right here, and it won't don't try to make the whole, don't try to make it meet up in the middle. What we're doing is basically making us fill into the void here, so this will fit roughly in there, more or less width-wise. So that leaves us with a substantially smaller gap to work with. And what I'm hoping is that I can bring the top, essentially, the bottom, but this new top piece here, pretty much in line with this smooth, flat area here. And then we can cut just the rail. We could even use this guy here, that's just the rail itself, And if we wanted to, we could even keep it's got little, kind of angles forward just a little bit, and has this little deal. We might be able to integrate some of that part, but of course, then again, if we're just using just the rail itself, I might be able to find a piece a little more appropriately sized. But I'm thinking we can just cut this piece off, fit it as kind of a spacer, so instead of having this round piece here, it'll come up a little boxier and basically kind of bevel over a little bit, and then create a new flat area that'll be substantially set in further than the actual width of the blaster itself, so it'll be in a ways further. Then we can cap that with a piece of rail. So we'll still need to trim some of this off, but I think I want to work on getting these new side plates built, because once we get those on there, actually, if we can get the body to line up right enough, then we might be able to, depending on, because I'm looking at the motors here, there's still a little ways we can go before we actually run out of shell and have to start cutting a hole. So there's a possibility that if we add these kind of side plates and cap that off, we might not have to build an external cover for the motors, which would be super neat, just because with how slab-sided the thing is, if we add a big bulky who knows what right here, it's going to be like, hey, there's a big bulky who knows what right there. So I think I'll start cutting on this guy and see how close we can get. We'll have to cut off, obviously, the majority of the bottom flat part here, so we can get it to hug as close to the barrel housing, I guess you'd call that, and cut off these giant lugs. So, but if we play our cards right, that might earn us another screw port we can use, which is another one right up here where we don't necessarily need it, because we already have kind of one that may or may not go away during this whole process. But this does give us another opportunity when we build the tack rail. If we can find one that has a screw right there, if we could get it to lap over far enough and use a screw port right there to be able to tie the top of the shell together, that would be great. So let's start cutting on this guy. Okay, so that puts that right there, which as of right now, it's gonna be a close call. I'm not sure how much longer 180s are, and I think we're getting to the point where we're about ready to punch a hole in the shell, or at least in the stripe side, which the stripe's already gone on the top, but the bottom part of the shell. Start hogging that out and get some 180 set in there and see just how much room we need. But I think this here, so it lines up really good with right here. It just kind of rounds over here, turns into that line there and goes up. And this here will, yeah, actually I'm really happy with how the lines kind of line up. So I think that's a keeper. And need to reshape the front just a little bit, and it didn't cap off everything up front, but at least narrowed it down to where I think we can, in the course of filling and adding the DevCon, we could throw. Hopefully, by the time we get a rail on there, there'll only be a little tiny spot that we could either cut a piece to fit, or there might be enough gush out from the DevCon to fill that. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But do a little more trimming. Now the bottom part of the material here, where it's going to meet the top of the shell and kind of that joint there, it's relatively thick, so I think I'm going to see if I can file a bevel on it, and maybe I'll be able to pull it towards the shell just a little bit closer, because there's just that angle where it comes in, and I want to be able to drop that right on top and tuck it in as close as possible. So I'm just gonna take a bevel and just take it that way a little bit. Okay, this is going to be kind of tricky to line up. I was just kind of mocking it up for how difficult it'll be to glue. And because it's, for one thing, the top will be floating a little bit, and since this surface here isn't totally flat, trying to line it up here, it's wanting to like, well, what part of the flat do you want me to be on? What are we doing? Plus, it's on a point essentially on the bottom, so it's wanting to like sag into the middle a ways. So we may add a brace kind of thing in the middle here that kind of sticks out, just so we have something to trim down until this sits where it's supposed to be. That way we can just glue it up and just stick it in there and have something we can hold it on, instead of trying to like delicately balance it just right so it's not, you know, going one way or the other. And you know, so we may end up doing that. So still pretty happy with how that looks though, as far as it seems to at least doesn't like necessarily match the aesthetic, but at least blends in enough. Kind of like the grip here. It's obviously different, but it's not so radically different that it's like, whoa, what's that weird piece of something else that you put there that's really going to throw off the integration once there's paint on it. Which is, again, part of the goal when you're doing an integration, is to make it hard to see where the lines are. You're just trying to blur the lines between, you know, between shells, whether it's a, you know, a straven. You don't want to have a solid line where somebody says, oh, here's a strife, solid line, and then here's the raven. You want to have it just be like, hey, it's something entirely new, made out of parts of other things. So I think this will fit the bill just fine, which will be about there. But you know what we could do, because I seem to have trimmed it off just a little too short, because I wasn't planning on doing the bevel thing yet until I'd already had the height established, and then it lost a little bit when it pulled in a little. So in order to get that height back, it is going to follow the contour of this curved part just a little bit, so that means it's going to go inboard a little further. So we're going to lose a little of the room for the motors. So rats. I suppose what we could do is hold it off just a little bit. There again, just take a shim, just find something like the width of blaster shell or something, because that's kind of a nice incremental width to play with. Just get a scrap of something and fit it in there, so you have something you can butt this up next to that stands it off just a little, and then rock it over and have that extra width, which wouldn't be a bad deal. I'm just trying to picture, because you figure before we put the motor cage there's a radical jump where the front of the Centurion basically, you know, squared off more or less, and then the barrel housing attachment part just kind of fit up to it, so you had kind of a big goofy spot there. So if we have a more decorative, slightly more fluid looking weird spot, then, you know, we're no worse off for sure. So maybe I'll do that. Find a shim of something like this piece of shell that we cut off from the Stampede that's, you know, kind of a nice width, and we'll trim that off a little bit, maybe just a couple little pieces, and then just stick them there, and then hold the piece on there and kind of see if it standing it off a little bit looks like it'll help clear the motors and line everybody up better. And for the heck of it, because I don't want to waste time waiting for the hot glue to heat up, I think instead we're just going to tack it in place real quick with just a little bit of this super glue here. Okay, there's a little bit of what I believe was a screw boss on the back that's kind of bumping it out a little bit and making it not sit perfectly straight. So we'll whittle that off. Doesn't look too bad. Yeah. And then of course this hole, we'll just gorp some DevCon in there and smooth it off, and no one's the wiser. And there's a little bit of that leaves it. Oh, where are we? There we are. Leaves a little bit of gap. Come on now. Whew. Just a little bit of gap on the front, but there again, that just gives us a little room to get the DevCon in there. And once it's all filed and shaped, so you won't even see it. Just gonna test something here real quick. Just looking at my scrap pieces, and I have the remains of the MOLLE attachment loops from a set of in-mags that I got that cut off, and those will show up in another video some other time. Just eyeballing and seeing if this width here is the right width to work as a standoff to help support this guy. I might try, just a little bit, the focus is freaking out, taking this guy and just lapping a little bit of it on the inside here, and then fitting it and trimming a little bit off the end, a little bit off the end, until we reach the point where we can use this as kind of a kickstand or a brace to prop against this area in order to hold it nice and flat and straight. Okay. So we say, oh, well, that's obviously too long. We'll nip off just a little bit.